Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First, we'll look on the paper EOB we have before us and click up in the box and enter in the first claim ID off the EOB that will be tied to the patient. In this case, it's going to be 1636. And if it has the letter A next to it, usually that means it's the claim ID, but don't put the A in and hit the tab key. And of course, it pulls up our same patient, Homer Simpson, Blue Cross Blue Shield. And then what we want to do here is enter in the total amount that the insurance carrier is going to be paying for this patient out of the $840 that's sitting here. So the total payment amount, let's say, is going to be $750, and then hit the tab key. And then once I type it in and hit tab, it says, well, I have a remaining right here, $750. So when I take the $750, divvy it out between the two charges here, or put it all in one charge, whatever the EOB tells me, the remaining up here ought to equal 0. So I need to take this and spread it out on these charges below. Now, before I get any further, let me explain this. Down below you have the debit adjustment button. Basically, you can post two different types of charges. You can post a debit adjustment charge, which if you recall watching the debit adjustment training video and setting up your debit adjustment codes, if you watch that, you'll understand that the debit adjustment charge means it just posts in your reports as a charge in the charge column. But if you choose a debit adjustment, then it will post as a charge, but as a negative charge in your adjustment or write-off column. Now, for all the intricacies of why or why not you don't want to do that, you want to watch the training video on the debit adjustment setup. So assuming that you know the debit adjustment here, there's a warning I want to give you. You want to first post any debit adjustments here first before you continue on. In fact, it would have been even better to use the debit adjustment before I typed in the payment, because if I go ahead and type in all the payments and then I say, oh, I want to post a charge now, and I click on this, the moment I do that and I post the debit adjustment charge or debit adjustment write-off code, it's going to clear everything out. Well, it'll still have the patient here, yeah, but it's going to clear out, set it back to 0 the payment and all the hard work I did down below, which we haven't covered yet, but we will in just a second. So of this $750, I'm going to say that the insurance carrier is going to pay us $700 we got to divvy out between these two charges, and the extra $50 is, late interest. Yeah, that's a lot of interest, but anyways, I like even numbers here, so we'll say $50 for interest. So what I want to do is I want to post a debit adjustment code or a charge code of interest of $50, and then take the extra $50 up at the top for the payment and take the $50 and post it to that charge so I can get a 0 balance, okay? And then of course the $700 I'm going to divide it between these two charges down below. So to get started, I'm going to click on the debit adjustment button, and I'll tell you this right now, the only time I use a debit adjustment at all for posting charges is for insurance interest, because it makes it really easy and nice to do it. But outside of that, I would just use regular charge codes. For example, if I wanted to bring a balance forward, I'm going to post it as a charge. I will not use a debit adjustment. Again, watch the training video. Okay, we'll click on the debit adjustment button. And you'll see right here it's tied to the data service, the visit number, which is perfect. And then I just need to pull up my interest code by clicking on the ellipsis button. There's my interest right here, and I'll double click on it. To overemphasize this debit adjustment code could either be a debit adjustment, or a debit adjustment charge code. And again, the only way you'll find out if you can't remember how you set this up is to go to master files, to transaction codes, and then over and up to debit adjustment codes. And you'll see the two options here. All you have to do is pull up the code here by clicking on the button. There's my interest, double click on it. And good, it's set up as a charge, not a debit adjustment code as a debit adjustment. It's a debit adjustment code posting as a charge. So good, that's the way I want it to be. I'll click close, go back to my quick pay. There's my interest. Now how much is the carrier paying in interest for being so late in paying me the $700 here? Well, we said it was 50, so I'll type in 50 and hit the tab key. And then type in a note, whatever you want to type in a note for. And then, do I want to include this on the patient statement? Well, no, the patient doesn't really need to know that they're paying me extra because they're late in paying this, so I'll leave it off and not check it. The nice thing about this is that once I post this charge, that note here will be tied to this charge, so I can view it later on. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Give it a second or two, because this screen will refresh and actually pull it down below all in blue. If it's all in blue, that means it's a debit adjustment, either a debit adjustment code of a debit adjustment or debit adjustment code charge. You can see up at the top the payment got cleared out. It used to be $750, now it's 0. So that's why I say do your debit adjustments if you have any at first before you start entering in your payments. Now I can come back here and type in $750, hit the tab key, and because the payment's going to be tied to the financial class after I hit the tab key is going to update the codes down below. And you can see the financial class is Blue Cross. So, for example, master files to financial class, and the code was BC, right? So I'll select it over here, and you can see the write-off code was WOCAP. You can click on the ellipsis button to find out what the write-off code means, and also it's pulling in the allowed amount, the allowed fee schedule tied to my fee schedule of BCBS. Again, all these training videos as far as setting up your financial class here, tying it to your fee schedule, are the training videos, and the keywords are financial class and fee schedules. Close out, come back to my quick pay, and that's why it's automatically populating here, because Homer Simpson has a financial class he's tied to, so it automatically puts in the write-off code so I don't have to do that if I decide to write something off, or in this case, if it's a contractual obligation with the insurance carrier. So we'll cover that just in a second here. So we can continue down the line. Insurance is going to be paying this, or posting the payment from the insurance, PI payment insurance, deposit date, and then finally a note. And you can watch a training video on setting up your notes, and once you set them up, you can click on the ellipsis button here. And of course, if none of the notes are here, you can always click Add New, but double click on one, it puts in the code and then types in the note. But I don't want this to be in there, and I'll delete it. Also, you can decide whether or not you want the note to go out on the statement. So I'll uncheck this, and you can type in anything you want. And this is going to be tied to the payment that I'm going to be posting down below. So later when I post the payment, I look in the patient history screen, which we'll do after we're done here, to see what it looks like after we post a payment, where it populates, and how I can either void the payment later on if I need to. Well, when I double click on that payment after it's been posted, it will show me the note here. And that's just for me, unless of course I want to send this out by checking the box on the statement so the patient gets okie dokie. So I'll uncheck that. Now that we have this upper left hand corner section set up, I want to tackle the information down below. And what I mean by that is that, well, first of all, here's a $700 charge, right? And then the allowed amount, because it's pulling from the financial class, it's tied to a fee schedule, Blue Cross. In there for this code, it's saying, look, for Blue Cross Blue Shield, the allowed is $564. Now the thing about this is if this is incorrect, or let's say Blue Cross Blue Shield updated their fee schedule, well, go back to your fee schedules, master files, to fee schedules, and then update the fee schedule there. So in the future, when you go back and you post other payments, if the allowed amount was $600 now, then it will populate 600. But if you don't want to do that and it's just a one-time thing, then come in here and you'll notice that you can click in any one of these fields here and change them. And if you change them, it's going to update other fields. They're going to be tied to other fields mathematically. For example, the allowed amount is $564 of the $700, and what's not allowed is $136 of the $700. So if I go ahead and say $600 is allowed and hit the tab key, automatically shifts the not allowed to make it balance out so that the total between the two is $700. What about if I just found out that the patient has a copay of $15 that they're responsible for, and so in the patient portion down below, and again we're looking at the column headers here, patient portion for this visit here is the bottom and the insurance is the top. So if I want to do a one-time change here, I can say, well, there's $15, and then the moment I hit the tab key, it updates, subtracts it from the insurance portion, because between the two we got to have it equal $700, right? Okay. So now the insurance balance is $685, and it's still the patient balance is $15. And then you'll notice when I make changes here, because the allowed amount is $600, that is also going to be tied to your write-off. The difference between your total charge and the allowed amount is your contractual obligation to be written off $100. So you see, if you need to make changes, that's fine. But just know if you do it here, it's a one-time thing, just for when you're posting this payment. But if you want it to be continuously, then just make sure for your allowed amount, update your fee schedule. For your patient portion, if his copay is always going to be $15, then just go to the Patient Demographics Insurance tab and update that as well. So make your changes here if you need to. And then when you're ready, come over here and looking on the paper EOB, type in the payment amount that they say is going to be tied to this charge. Okay, so now we want to come to the payment amount field of each charge and enter and split the $750 between the three, if that's what the EOB is telling us to do. So let's pretend in the first payment for the first charge of $10022 is going to be $300. Hit the tab key, so after I enter it in, there we go. And you can see up at the top that the remaining amount of the $700 after I hit the tab key is $450, so I have to split that over the next two charges here. Now, just to the right of this is a square box. This is called the payment reason code, or the why of the payment. So this will be the why of the payment from the patient or insurance. In this case, we're doing it from the insurance. We're posting a payment to add to the patient's date of service when we're posting payments. And it's going to appear on the statements, your secondary e-claims or electronic claims, collections and denial tracking modules, ERA, and payment reason reports. Now, probably the biggest benefit of using the payment reason codes here, although you really don't have to, of course, the more information that you have entered into the system here, the better your reports, the more detailed they'll be. And secondly, is that when you submit your secondary electronic claims, these payment reason codes are going to go out with the amount. So theoretically, when the insurance carrier gets those secondary claims, they'll see exactly what the primary carrier did and help them out to be able to process the secondary claim faster and get it back to you. So that's always a plus, to get your payments back as soon as you can and make it easier on those secondary claims. So let's take a look at some of the payment codes here. We'll click on the gray box, and it's got the information up here. Of course, the information that we already see behind us here is now pulled up here. And then the reason codes that will tie to this payment, we'll click on the ellipsis button. Now you're going to have three types of default codes: your CR, which is your correction reversals, and these are tied to the claims that the insurance can identify as they're insured. Also, you have the CO codes, and there's some right here, and that's your contractual obligation codes that you'll be using. Usually if the charge is going to exceed the allowed amount is one example. And then your PR codes, which is going to be your patient responsibility, such things as like the copay. Now, a lot of the details in setting up your payment reason codes is going to be explained in the payment reason code training video, so you want to watch that before you get to this point. And if you haven't, go ahead and pause this one and quickly watch that one, because these are the ANSI default codes that Advanced MD has set up in the software here. You don't have to use them. You can set up your own codes, and if you do, that's okay. Just know that every time, and I'm going to click cancel, I add a code here and I click OK, I'm going to get a warning every time. Advanced MD is trying to help out to make these codes tied to them, these ANSI codes. When the secondary claim goes out to the carrier, they understand those ANSI codes and can quickly process those claims. But if you're not concerned about that, well, then you don't have to use them. Just know you're going to get a warning every time. So what I like to do is use these default reason codes.